We're going to learn a couple of new modify commands. I'm going to talk about polylines and editing them. I'm also going to introduce the idea of arrays. In order to do this, I'm going to go ahead and start a polyline command first and click a few points here. I notice that down in my polyline command line there is an option there for close. If I type C enter, that shape will close. And I'm assured that the point that I started at is the point that the last click would be placed at. So this is a closed object. Good object to hatch, for example. Now, polylines are a little special. We've learned some things about them. If we select them, we can see that they're all one object. We know that we can hover over these grips and convert them to arcs, for example. So they do behave a little differently than normal lines. There's some other things to know about here as well, most of them found in the Properties menu. We see that we have some options here in geometry where we can change which vertex we are identifying. And if I was to select the current vertex cell, I could toggle through the different vertexes, and you'll see on the screen that it picks different points along the polyline. Each of those points has a geometry. Each of those points has certain properties that are specific to it. One of the things we can do is we can select a point and change the width of the object at that point. So I'm going to do that now. We'll say 3. And you can see that the polyline changes along the length of the line. The start point is 3, the end point is 0. And I could do that for each individual vertex if I wanted to. I could do it here, for example, and make the end point 3, and we would see that those 2 points would come together. I hit escape to let go of those things. If you have a polyline and you would like the entire length of the polyline to have a specific width, you can also select that polyline and use a command PE enter. That will edit the polyline. You can see this also has options. One of the options down here is width, and I can type W enter and type 2 for the whole width. So everything changes to 2. The polyline can be exploded. We've talked about the explode command before. If I select this object and explode it by typing X enter, it reverts back to the lines. And you can see very quickly that the difference between the lines and the polylines is visual. Lines cannot have a global width. They can have a length and they can have endpoints, but they don't have a global width. So when I converted these to lines, the width that I had assigned them as polylines was eliminated from their properties. This brings up the question, is it possible to take a shape and convert it from lines back into polylines? And the answer is yes. Here's how. Type PE enter. Select one of these lines. Now the command line is saying select a polyline, but I'm picking a line. It asks me, this is not a polyline, would you like to turn it into one? My answer is a resounding yes. At this point I can use the option join. J enter, and it asks me to select all the objects I'd like to join with this polyline. It will only join objects that share endpoints. I'm pretty convinced this one already does. If I select all of these pieces and hit enter, they are now a polyline again. I can hit enter to end the polyline edit command, and I can see these are all polylines again. I'm able to set their global width over here as well, just to prove the point. There they are. Now, we've got a little funny shape here. This allows me to explore the array command. The array command will allow us to take an object or a series of objects or a series of anything that we've drawn on the screen and copy them either in a specific grid or around a circle or arc. We can also set up an array to run in an angle or even along a spline. I'm just going to explore the first 2 options today. So if I select this object and I find the array command, it's here on the modify panel, and it gives you some information there. You can see that I could start the command by typing array rect. I can also type AR enter. I'm given some options. I'm going to start with the rectangular one. Now you'll notice the word rectangular is in the brackets, and if I right click or hit enter, I can accept that as the default, and it automatically will draw for me an array. It will default to a series of objects that is 4 columns wide by 3 columns tall, and space them out so that they don't touch each other. Now, I may like this arrangement. Probably it needs some adjustment. Let me zoom out just a bit. Now that I've zoomed out a little bit, I'm going to use these grips. Now you'll notice the array has different kinds of grips. Some of them are square, some of them are triangular, and they mean different things. They all relate to these things above in the context-specific array ribbon. What I can see here is there are columns, the space between the columns, and there's a total distance along the length of the columns. I have the same for the rows. I have a number of rows, the space between rows, and the total distance of rows. Those numbers relate to these grips, and what you'll notice is if I grab one of these arrowheads and move it horizontally across my screen, I can make the array larger. The numbers at the top update, or I can make more rows, and the numbers at the top will update. If I shrink them, the same thing happens. If I grab the grips that are slightly closer, the grips that are next to the origin, and I move those, that will change the space between the objects. So that's nice if we just need to have a basic feel for things. If we want to be very specific, then I need to key in the information. So here I have 3 columns, I want 4. And I want the space between them to be a whole number. So I'm going to type 280. Same thing for the rows, we'll have 6. And the space between them, let's make it 70. Let's go ahead and close this array. This set of objects now is behaving as one piece. If I wanted to break it apart, then I would need to explode that. Now I've exploded the array, not the polylines. I'm going to zoom in again where I can see one of these objects. The last modify tool that we're going to play with here is the array command, but we're going to use a circular array. So I'm going to peel off one of these objects. And I'm going to create a circular array of this object. Select it. Type AR, enter. Take the option for PO, polar. It asks me first for a center point of my array. I'm going to pick a point that's relatively close to my object. It automatically defaults to a hexagonal array. I have lots of options up here in the ribbon. This is a context-specific array ribbon. And again, we see the number of objects, the space between, the angle of the fill. We can also create multiple rows, multiple levels if we were working in 3D. Let me play around with some of this and show you how it works. If I make a second row, we'll see that there is now double of them as they span out. The space between them isn't enough, so let's adjust that to about 60. Maybe more. Let's go 100. Now we can see them. We can also make the angle between them different. Let's say I want to make the angle 45. And we can see all 6 of them now are in a 45-degree angle. If I wanted to have more items, then I could change the number of items here, 12. If I wanted the space between them to be greater, I could say not 4 degrees, but 10. That's how a circular array works. Again, it's a group of objects. In order to select these things individually again, I would need to explode them. And now I can select individuals